Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Grace Hatfield from EHS Daily Advisor, and thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Faces of EHS. This is a segment where we feature environmental health and safety professionals and highlight their journeys and hear their thoughts about EHS trends and issues. Today, we're joined by Adele Abrams, who is the president of the law office of Adele L. Abrams P.C. So, hi, Adele, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Grace. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. So, can you tell us a little bit about your position at the law office and what you guys do as a firm?
Well, as you can tell, the firm has my name in it, and that makes me the president. But I am not the only attorney. We actually are a national OSHA and MSHA practice, as well as employment law and environmental law. And I'm based in our DC area office, which is our main, the mothership, if you want to call it that. And then we have offices in Denver, West Virginia. But we do kind of have a boutique practice focusing primarily on occupational safety and health uh, litigation, representing employers in OSHA citations and MSHA, but also whistleblower matters. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit. And in that, I have represented the employees in some of the cases. And then I also teach employment and labor law at University of Colorado and at Catholic University in DC. And that was online before it was cool. It's in their master's program. And I will say one of the things that I've been able to do is include 1 week where we're focusing on OSHA
Oh,
because
that's awesome.
it's a master's in HR program, and in my experience, over we'll talk about that, but in safety going back decades, what I find is very often the HR people are tasked with the OSHA compliance, even though they have no safety background. So this is
Hmm.
my little way of introducing them to that other four-letter word in addition to the EEOC, that they're going to potentially have to grapple with.
Gotcha. Great. So let's get right into it. How did you get your start in EHS law?
Well, I was in EHS before I was in EHS law,
Hmm.
and my way, I find many people, especially women, tend to get into safety through circuitous routes. So I was
Hmm.
not the traditional person who I did get a bachelor's of science degree, but I did not go into occupational safety and health coursework. I was actually a journalism major, and I found my way into government affairs work being in the DC area, that's not uncommon. And the first government affairs job I had, which was in 1983, kids don't try to do the math, or count my rings. I started as a small child, obviously. Uh, it was writing an OSHA comment, and it was on an indoor air quality rule that ended up being withdrawn and never saw the light of day. But I thought, well, this is kind of intriguing, and I had another task which was reading the Federal Register, and again I started noticing, oh, there's these safety things going on. Well, very shortly after that, I moved to a construction trade association, national one, and
Hmm.
I was told that my obligation I was the writer was to write all of their comments to OSHA and MSHA. I also, though, got involved with work zone safety, and this was a highway and
Hmm.
heavy construction association. So I got to know the companies, I got to know the safety issues, and it really started resonating with me. I loved that part of it much more than what I was doing, say, on employment law or environmental issues, for example, or highway funding, even. So my next job was also in government affairs, but that brought me into the mining industry. And so, in addition to OSHA, now I was told there was this other four-letter word, MSHA, which is the Mine Safety and Health Administration. And again, really loved the safety aspect, loved the fact that I was communicating information that could save lives. But I also realized I need to know what I'm talking about. So I did a deep dive in terms of professional development, both, with the support, I will say, of the association I was working for. And I got very involved with the National Safety Council. So right around 1989 is when I joined the National Safety Council, got involved with a couple of their divisions. I'm still very active in their business and industry division, and I was the founding co-chair of their women's caucus, which is now the women's division. So that was a real jumping off point for me. That was when I was really, sitting down, spending 3 or 4 days at these conferences with safety professionals from a variety of industries. And, you know, I think a lot of us, again, learn, flying seat of our pants kind of thing. But I knew that it was very critical. The information that I was communicating had to be legit. It had to be, founded in good safety practices. So, like I said, I became a student of safety, kind of studying on my own with the help of this support network that initially came both out of my association safety committee, which I was the one responsible for running it. So I got to know a lot of those folks. And, I will say a lot of them were my early mentors. You know, I can never be grateful enough that they took me seriously because, again, you know, I was at that time in my early 30s coming into a construction group, coming into mining group. And, you know, I did not fit the mold, I guess is a good way to put it. And they could have been very dismissive or even said, "Why did you hire her? She doesn't know what she's doing." Instead, they took the time to teach me.
Mhm.
Excuse me.
No, you're good. You're good.
So
Yeah. So that's.
that's how I got my start. But I will just add,
Mhm.
I was doing all of that. So basically, 10 years in safety and health. And then I
Mhm.
went to law school at night while I was doing that, while I was working full time.
Oh
Um,
wow.
I could tell people, was it worth it? Yes, it was worth it. Had I known what it was going to be like at the beginning of the 4 years, because it was 4 years of hard labor at night, I might have given it a second thought, but, I'm very grateful that I did it. And I knew when I started law school that I wanted to study and eventually work in occupational safety and health law. So it
Mhm.
was not that I was a generalist lawyer who kind of found my way into safety and health. I found, after working in safety and health, especially at the association level, that if I really wanted to be able to take what I was learning and parlay it and effectively get it out there to people, that was a good route for me. So that's what I've been trying to do. And it's been, over 25 years now that I've been a safety lawyer.
Yeah. Well, awesome. So you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but who's been your biggest influence in the industry?
Well, I would say when I started at that National Safety Council,
Mhm.
the group I was with, which was the cement quarry and mineral aggregates section, doesn't even exist anymore. Um, there were two people in there, and I'll give a shout out by name. One was Jim Christie, and he was the head of safety with Vulcan Materials, which was a big construction aggregates producer, publicly traded company kind of thing. And he is the one, he was chair of our safety committee at the National Stone Association, where I got into the mining stuff. And he was on the safety council as well. He took me under his wing and just spent countless hours patiently explaining things to me. The other person who I also met at that first safety council meeting was a woman named Cheryl Suzio, and sadly she just passed away last year.
Oh
But
no.
she was, in my view, one of the first women in mine safety. And she ended up working her way all the way up onto the board of the National Association. Again, a trailblazer. I think she may have been one of the first woman to serve on that association board. Uh,
That's
but
awesome.
but she showed me that it could be done, and she was really a leader that I respected. We became close friends, and I mourn her passing. But those are two people who come to mind. Now, I will say I got involved after a few years with the American Society of Safety Engineers, ASSE, which is now American Society of Safety Professionals. And a few years, into my membership there, they started the group WISE, which is it was Women in Safety Engineering. Now it's Women in Safety Excellence. I like that. And I was one of the first members of that group. Our first kickoff meeting, I think we had 10 people in a little conference room. And that has grown to, hundreds and hundreds of members. And those women who were really the pioneers of that group, they were also, I think, both mentors and people who influenced me deeply. I will say that they did a project the 100 women in safety, and it's, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 years ago now that they did this. They did include me in the book, but they had everybody from Frances Perkins, who was the first female head of OSHA, to people who are currently practicing. And if you get a copy of that book, and I think it's still out there, there are an awful lot of women in there, some of whom have passed now, who I do consider among my true friends, and among the people who influenced me in a very positive way, that you could be a successful woman in the safety field.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to track that book down. Um, so my next question is, what is your best mistake and what did you learn from it?
Hmm. Well, that's an interesting question. And I really, was kicking this around because a best mistake, you know, the one that I learned from the most was a very tragic situation. And now I will say I have handled over 400 fatality cases. I learned something from their mistakes in every one of those cases. But there was one case, and it was a fatality, and I was working with the owner of the company. It was a very small company, and he was very distraught. And with some reason. There, this was a mining case, and there was a potential that the case might go criminal. But I was, keeping him calm, I thought, and I could tell he was having emotional issues, and I could tell he was drinking a lot. He would call me at night, and we would talk, about the case. And I could tell he was in his cups. But, I thought everything was going swimmingly. Yeah, don't worry, I've got this. Well, um, he went up to his company and he shot himself to death.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow, yeah.
he had a single truck accident shortly before that, which we then recognized later was a suicide attempt. And
Oh, wow.
what I learned from that is that, it's easy for me to compartmentalize as an attorney. And
Mhm.
sometimes, I got to suck it up. I can't be there, crying over blood on the floor. And literally, I mean that when I'm showing up on some of these scenes. I'm the one who has to help other people keep their stuff together. But at the same time, it really, you know, awakened in me the fact that when you're looking at root causes and you're also looking at, defenses, I have to take the human factor and into account. And from that day on, every time I work on a fatality, first of all, I tell the company you have to hire a grief counselor to come in and talk to everybody. You have to be attuned to this. And I've had several cases. I'm horrified to even have to admit this, but there've been at least three other cases where people who were supervisors committed suicide in months after, thinking that the company was blaming them or OSHA or MSHA were blaming them. And I'm not going to be the attorney that they think is blaming them. You know, but it has inspired me to get training. And now I'm doing training myself, and doing some volunteer work as well in the realm of behavioral and emotional support and psychological first aid. Because, when somebody cuts themselves in the workplace, we have triage on that. When somebody is emotionally suffering, we tend to just say, you're not fit for work, go home, which may be the economic factor that breaks somebody's back just being sent home from work that day. Um, and so, the whole approach of reflective listening and really being attuned to what's going on with those around you and those you're dealing with. Yes, I have to be professional. Yes, I have to look at defenses. Yes, my job is to try to keep my clients calm. But, for safety professionals out there, not even attorneys, but you are dealing with people in crisis
Mhm.
on a regular basis. And
Absolutely.
it's not
Yeah.
enough to say you didn't lock out and I'm sending you home. You've got to figure out what's going on. Why didn't they? Are they okay?
Mhm. Yeah.
And look at the whole human. Don't just stop at the first root cause you can find, or worse yet, figure if you can throw somebody under the bus, it'll make it easier for the company, because that
Mhm.
person you're throwing under the bus has tread marks on them, on their body, on their
Absolutely.
soul, on their brain. And unfortunately, we have a rash of suicides right now in mining and construction anyway. We have the
Mhm.
highest suicide rates of any occupation. So,
Interesting.
I
Yeah.
work in these sectors, and everybody's got to be a macho man, you don't let them see you
Mhm.
cry.
Mhm.
But when things really get intense, these are the possible outcomes. And so you need to be attuned to that. When we say safety and health professional,
Mhm.
often we get caught up in the S part, the safety, and we forget
Mhm.
about the health. It goes beyond chemical safety. It's also, again, the human factor.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, if COVID taught us anything, it's to pay attention to our mental health at work. And so I'm sure that, as like things like ESG and, total worker health and behavior-based safety pop up, like those are all going to be important things to focus on.
Those are all things in my wheelhouse. I'm talking on
Yeah.
ESG at the National Safety Council coming up, in fact. Uh,
Yeah, well, I'll be there for that, so hopefully I'll
Come
get to
on
see you
by.
in person, yeah. So speaking of mental health, and things like that, what are some core values that companies need to keep in mind when developing safety programs?
Well, along the same lines, one of the things, certainly we say, well, safety has to be a core value. And to those companies who go, well, safety is our first priority, priorities shift, values don't. Values are kind of ingrained. And, the best thing a company can do is make sure that the people they're hiring, especially at the supervisory level, share those core values. And a company can't be, talking the talk but not walking the walk. If you say safety first, but then if you don't meet your production quota, you're out the door, then safety is going to be sacrificed on the altar of production. Uh, but the other thing is, again, the human element. Right now, they talk about the great resignation, they talk about hiring problems. Well, value those workers you have. We talk about HR, human resources, the Mine Act, which I deal with all the time. They talk about the most valuable resource, the miner. It's in codified legislation, and yet again, I see a lot of companies that really don't do a lot to instill loyalty. And
Mhm.
one of the things that you can do to get workers to care is to show you care about them,
Mhm.
you know,
Absolutely.
by
Yeah.
providing them a safe and healthful workplace. Don't do just the bare minimum that is necessary. If all you're doing is complying with OSHA regulations, you're complying essentially with ANSI standards from the 1960s.
Yeah.
And think about that. Would you drive a car that was designed to the safety standards of the 1960s? I mean, you might if it's an old Mustang
Yeah.
or something, but for the most part, you wouldn't want to put your kids in it. And so, that's really, what I look at is, you've got to look at the unique characteristics of your workforce, foster diversity, be accepting of diversity, be inclusive. Again, the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion is very much something that I'm knee deep in right now. And I heard it described a very good way, which is, diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. And so, that's kind of a challenge as well. You might say, oh, we have women working at our construction company, but how many of them are in supervisory positions? How many of your African American workers are? How many of your safety professionals are? You know, um, mix it up a bit, and you're going to be able to attract a more diverse and qualified workforce. So those are a couple of the things, but the other is, you know, very often companies give short shrift to training. And we have more and more use. I'm about to go down a passion trail of mine. We have more and more use of temporary workers and part-time workers, and what's sometimes called the fissured workforce, where people are having their main job and a side hustle or two or three part-time jobs. Well, that leads to worker stress. It leads to fatigue, which impacts fitness for duty. But it also deprives workers of a lot of benefits that, really were established to be kind of a social safety net. And once the workers see that you just as soon replace them with a temp worker as keep them, um, they're not going to really again look at your place as a place of employment where they can build a career. And for their
Mhm.
part, the temporary workers, they are getting injured and killed at like twice the rates of
Yeah.
permanent workers. And a lot of it goes to the training issue. They're not getting that deeper onboarding from the safety and health perspective because once again the employers don't see them as being there for an extended period. So why invest the money to do that
Mhm.
training? So these are some of the things I kind of pound the soapbox on. Obviously, safety and health management programs are great. I am a big supporter of those, but you've got to have a good safety culture to start with. Otherwise, you're just,
Mhm.
going through the exercises, but there's not going to really be any meat on the bones of that program.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know you mentioned this in your introduction a little bit, but I know you cover whistleblower rights. So what can employers do to further protect whistleblower rights and avoid retaliation?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually going to be doing an 8-hour class on that coming up, but I'll give you
Oh wow.
the short form version of it, and
Yeah.
that is the current administration is very, very attuned to whistleblower rights.
Mm.
I am personally handling more whistleblower cases right now than our entire law firm did for the all 4 years of the Trump administration.
Oh wow.
And
That's
they are
interesting.
serious as a heart attack about
Yeah.
investigating these things. When you get a complaint, you're getting bankers boxes full of documents that you're going to have to produce to the agency. They're going to want to do Zoom interviews with everybody. HR is going to get implicated as well as the safety department. So these cases are very disruptive. As I like to say, the cheapest case to defend is the one that's never brought. And so, while employers may have pushed the envelope a little bit during the Trump administration, it's time to refresh with your supervisors what is protected activity by those workers, because it's a lot broader than just calling in a complaint to MSHA or OSHA or making a safety complaint to the employer. So there really is an educational process that is needed. Even the threat of discipline over a work refusal has been at the core of two cases that I've had. And one of those, they wanted $17,000 from the employer in order to settle the case. And this was someone who was never disciplined. The employer simply said, or the supervisor simply said, that he was thinking about disciplining the worker because the worker said, I'm not going to walk down into that area. It's too dusty. I'm afraid of silica issues. And 2 hours later, the supervisor said to the worker, I kind of overreacted there. Sorry. He had already filed a complaint with the agency.
Oh
So,
wow.
so on whistleblower, there's that. Understand what actions, are protected. If OSHA or MSHA show up and they say they're there on a hazard complaint, don't play 20 questions trying to figure out was it Larry, Moe, or Curly who called them. You don't want to know. You don't want to know. You don't want to guess. And even if you guess and you think it's Larry and it turns out it was Curly who called them, Larry is still protected against retaliation.
Mhm.
Even if they show up, the inspectors, I mean, and they find that the hazard complaint was meritless, that is still protected activity. And that's a
Mhm.
big mistake employers think. Okay, well, you told them that the brakes were bad on the loader. They came out, the brakes were okay. Now I'm going to fire you for lying to them. Well, no, not so fast, Charlie.
Yeah.
A lot of safety is subjective. And the bottom line is if somebody has made a complaint internally or to the agency, they are kind of bulletproof for a while in terms of adverse employment actions, unless you would have
Mhm.
taken it solely for another reason, like they were drunk or they were stealing money from the company or something like
Yeah.
that. Now,
Yeah.
beyond that, though, from the employee's perspective, the big game changer is that OSHA has incorporated whistleblower uh, outreach to their national emphasis programs. They did it, initially on COVID, on the COVID NEP, but now they've included a whistleblower component in their heat stress or heat illness prevention national emphasis program. And so what happens, when the inspector shows up, he's going to pull you aside and say, "Hey, Grace, I just wanted to review with you and make sure you understood what your rights were." They're going to review with the workers that it is, not just the complaints and the work refusals, it's testifying at a hearing against the employer. It's, complaining about a settlement. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of things, including reporting an injury or an illness. And where things have gotten complicated on the whistleblower front, and this started under Obama, and again, it all kind of went to sleep for 4 years under the Trump administration, and now it's back, is looking at drug testing solely because someone was injured as being retaliatory for the act of reporting the injury. And there are certain types of drug testing that are allowed. And if it's part of a root cause investigation because you suspect impairment, that is permissible as well. But this whole routine thing that as soon as you say you need to get stitches, you're taken to the ER, but you're also drug tested, OSHA says that has a chilling effect on workers accurately reporting injuries. And so not only do we have the long-standing Section 11C of the statutory 1970 OSH Act that has only a 30-day statute of limitations for whistleblower protections. But now, as of really 2017, we've had a codified section. It's in the electronic record keeping rule. And so if an employee blows their 30-day statute of limitations, they can still call OSHA within 180 days and say, "Hey, I was fired because I reported I was injured and they drug tested me or they disciplined me more harshly." They can even complain that they were deprived of a benefit like a gift card under a safety incentive program because of reporting an injury. And OSHA has 180 days to investigate that. And here's what happens. Instead of it being a Section 11C action in U.S. District Court, they cite the employer under 29 CFR 1904.36, issue a fine, which can be up to $145,000. And then the abatement for the citation is the reinstatement of the worker or the make whole relief. So this happened again right at the very end, literally within a month of or so of the end of the Obama administration. It was a toy that the Trump administration never used, and now we're back at it. And that's these are all the factors that are really causing whistleblower prosecutions to explode. And as I mentioned, normally I represent companies in these cases, but I have represented, over a half a dozen individuals in whistleblower matters, including safety and health professionals who were told to do something that would have violated, the law, violated their code of ethics, and they were
Mm-hmm.
terminated as a result. So
Oh, wow.
all of
Yeah.
you EHS professionals out there, don't forget you have whistleblower rights as well. And OSHA
Mm-hmm.
also enforces the whistleblower provisions of all of the environmental statutes too. So,
Hmm.
just another fun fact there.
Yeah, so I know you mentioned drug testing. So as marijuana becomes legal in more places, what does the future of drug testing look like in the workplace?
Well, I'm going to make a bold prediction here that
Yeah.
drug testing, I'm going to say other than DOT, because DOT is always going to be a pure life form, but
Mm-hmm.
for normal business, manufacturing, construction, etc., I think companies are going to stop drug testing
Hmm.
because they can't find workers. First of all, we
Yeah.
have the vast majority, 37 states now have have medical marijuana legal. There's going to be 6 or 7 more states that are going to be on the referendum for recreational in November. There's already 18 states plus DC that do have recreational. So, the tiles are falling. And it's going to really have to be addressed kind of like alcohol. There's going to be an expectation for recreational that people aren't going to be high on the job. For medical cannabis, the real thing that has been the game changer there, to be a little trite, is its use as a replacement for opioids. And it is even now being, you can get a medical cannabis card in some states specifically for the treatment of opioid addiction. So it's being used not as a panacea, but to wean people off of opiates and then for pain management. And a lot of companies are realizing that if they have zero tolerance for medical cannabis, but if somebody's taking prescription opiates, they can work because it's not being reported as a positive drug test. What they're
Interesting.
doing, they're taking a company policy in favor of opiates. And
Yeah.
I had one client who's had multiple people in a year OD on the job from opiates.
Mm, yeah.
So that is one change I think that's going to happen. I do think that it's going to be legal federally before the end of Biden's term.
Yeah.
Not before the end of this year, but before the end of 2024.
Yeah.
And that is also going to be a big change, because then it will be protected under the federal Americans with Disabilities Act, just the way opiate use is. Right now, you do have to accommodate a worker who is taking opiates for a covered condition. You do not have to accommodate a medical cannabis user, at least at the federal level. Some state laws have built in employee protections into their medical cannabis laws, but it's a very crazy quilt from state to state to state. And, you know, Virginia, Maryland, and DC, just to use my area, Maryland, they all have medical cannabis laws, but only Virginia protects employees from drug testing, or being sanctioned for testing positive for medical cannabis. So how does that work? If you live in Virginia but you work in Maryland or DC, suddenly are those protections vitiated? What happens if you're a construction company and you work in all three states, because they're all within 5 miles of each other? Those kind of boundary issues really call out for a federal solution. And so I think that's where we're headed. And when I said doing away with drug testing, where I'm going with that is the substitute, I think, is going to be fitness for duty testing. And there are, some products uh, and apps that are coming on the market now. There's Druid, there's Sober Eye, which do a baseline for that employee, taking into a variety of exercises, and that becomes your baseline. So if a supervisor thinks Grace is acting a couple of bubbles off level today, you're going to undergo that test to
Hmm.
determine, are you okay? And, it doesn't matter whether it's cannabis, whether it's alcohol, whether you were up all night because you have colicky twins, whether you
Mhm.
were up all night because you just put your mom in an Alzheimer's facility, or your child ran away from home. I mean, there can be myriad things that put somebody off their game. And they
Mhm.
even say fatigue, going back to the Fishered Workplace issue. Um, if you are fatigued, it's like having 3 drinks under your belt.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I really think going to a more performance oriented fitness for duty approach is going to be, it's going to be a lot more workable in the end for
Mhm.
employers. And it isn't going to drive more people because, again, in the industries I work in, mining and construction, I call them the working wounded. So
Mhm.
many people, once they hit the age of 35, 40, they've got chronic pain,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they maybe are not going to be able to transition into another industry. They don't have high tech training, they don't have
Yeah.
degrees. So you have to be able to keep those people viably employed
Mhm.
without sacrificing themselves on the altar of their job, and being able to work relatively pain free. How that gets managed, I'll leave that to the experts, but that is the
Yeah.
direction I see things going, especially once cannabis is legal at the federal level.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm gonna have to look into some of those apps. That's really interesting. So kind of to pivot back to you personally, what are you most proud of?
Oh boy. Well, in terms of professional things, distinctions, I guess, I was the first attorney in the country who was a certified mine safety professional. And
Awesome.
more recently, and I'm not going to tell my age, but those of you who listened to the beginning, again, can probably add on your fingers and toes. Um, Last year, I studied for and I passed on the first time the ASP exam to be an associate
Oh,
safety professional.
congratulations.
So I'm here to be your poster child that, continuing education and professional development is a lifelong process.
Absolutely.
I used to joke that I was on the degree a decade program, and it was pretty much true the way it turned out. But um, I'm proud personally of having achieved that, and also having gotten the National Safety Council's Distinguished Service to Safety Award a few years ago, which is their highest individual honor that they give. But beyond that, you know, at the heart level, because professional, accolades are great. Um, I've been a mentor now myself through the ASSP WISE program, and also the National Safety Council, the Women's Caucus. Before we were a division, we had a mentoring program, and I'm proud to have been able to get that started for the National Safety Council. COVID kind of threw the boat on that, but passing along the information that I've accrued, and I've talked to a number of people working in safety about maybe going on to law school, and kind of continuing down the path that I have. So that's, I think, right now what I'm proudest on is having the ability and having a forum through these professional safety associations to pay it forward, to pass along the mentoring that I received back in the early and mid 1980s, that helped get me on this path to safety, even though I did not have the background for it going into it. All I knew how to do was, write a little bit. But I got quite an education along the way, and I'm so grateful for it. And now I try to parlay that into off the job safety. And I'll laugh about this, but it is true. Before doing this today, I was over at my community pool doing my swimming, and they have 15, 16-year-old lifeguards working there. I always talk to them about safety, and we're having a very hot day here today. So I gave my little pep talk for about 5 minutes on heat illness prevention.
There you
So
go.
I try to
Yeah.
carry the message where I can, and some people are receptive, some people aren't, but
Hmm.
that's all you can do is you can sow the seeds, and whether they turn into flowers or not is beyond my control.
Hope they grow, right?
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for your time. You've had such an incredible career, and I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to get to know you and hear everything you have to say. And I'm sure our audience is going to absolutely love to hear everything as well.
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity. And, you know, if I had to say anything in closing to those who are just coming into the field, um, it would be stay the course ethically. You're going to be challenged. You're going to be asked to do things that you're not going to want to do, and that you shouldn't do. And, your reputation really is all that you have. So, leaving the legality of things aside, act ethically, and find the right mentors. Find the people who will lead you on the right path. Don't go to the dark side. Don't follow people who you see willing to cut corners on things. And if
Yeah.
you do that, you'll have a wonderful, a very rewarding career in safety.
Alrighty, that's great advice. Everybody watching, please listen to that. Alrighty, well, thank you so much, Adele.
Thank you. Everybody,
Bye.
be safe.